and WNST. .net. All eyes on the NBA Finals, and certainly many folks believing there will be another parade in the Bay Area. Meanwhile, my many, many friends in Cleveland, and I know you may find that hard to believe that I do have friends in Cleveland, but I do. And I was kind of rooting for them, even though I'm not a LeBron guy. I'm not rooting for LeBron. It would not have broken my heart to see a parade there out in Cleveland, and probably would have made Michael Simon's food taste better the next time I'm in there. This guy covers all things sports in Cleveland. Sadly, he is a sports writer for the Associated Press. A lot of his work appears on our website at WNST.net. He is Tom Withers, and you can follow his journey as well as his incredible bobsled picture from the Sochi 14 Olympics at T. Withers AP. Tom, I've got a lot of friends in Cleveland, several on my Facebook page. It has really been quite a downer here thus far this week, right?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a shock to the system the way the Cavs have started out in the finals. I think everybody had real high hopes, and obviously you run into this well-oiled Golden State machine, and that can change your thoughts about just about anything. So, it's been a little bit of a rough start, but they're hoping to bounce back.
Well, even 2 weeks ago, right, in the midst of this, Cleveland had its hands full with Toronto, obviously, but watching it from afar, there was this first feeling ever, right, that the Warriors looked less than perfect and less than invincible, and I think bettors got caught up in that, moving point spreads in the Oklahoma City series. Right. A lot of people bet against Steph Curry just because they didn't have an opportunity to do that. And I'm sure in Cleveland the thought was, well, we'll get by Toronto, by hook or by crook. Maybe it'll go a little further. But this is going to be a different version of the Warriors we're going to see than this juggernaut that won 73 games. And lo and behold, it feels like a switch was flipped sometime around Game 5 against Oklahoma City, right?
Yeah, I think we all got caught up in that, didn't we? Everybody was quick to grab a shovel and start tossing dirt on the Warriors. And, they've not only responded to that, and kind of climbing out of the grave, and I think it's made them realize that they are indeed a special team with championship grit. And so, not that they needed any more motivation or any more fuel, but them coming back from a 3-1 has just established them as, potentially one of the great teams of all time. And maybe we all got caught up a little bit in that, hey, they look they look like they're not this flawless, pristine juggernaut that we thought they were during the regular season. So I don't think the Cavs ever got lulled into any kind of sense of complacency about who the Warriors are or what they can do. It's just that they're really clicking right now, and when that team is going good, man, they're tough to stop.
Were you at the game when they got waxed back in the winter? The last stand of Blatt and Lou. I mean, I remember putting that game on, and it was January 18th, right? I mean, I'm looking it up now, and the game was never close. They looked outclassed, much like they did last year, and the injuries were clearly a big factor for the Cavaliers this time last year. But it was that loss and sort of the reaction to that by LeBron, by the ownership. And certainly the media had to pick up the pieces and say, well, who's really running this place, and how are they a better team with Lou today? I mean, aren't they exactly where they would have been had they never done that back in January?
That's a tough question to answer. It's really hard to say. I mean, I think Lou has done a really nice job in making Kevin Love a more complete player under this, with this Cavaliers roster. I think he's also, in some ways, brought out the best and the worst in Kyrie Irving. I think he's allowed LeBron to play with a little bit more of a trust factor with his teammates. He's kind of urged him to, take over games when he needs to, but also be that facilitator and be the LeBron James that we all know and why we appreciate his game, and that he always tries to make the best basketball play. So I think what really stung the Cavs back in January was, that blowout loss against the Warriors by 34 points or whatever it was, came after Curry had said, hey, we're going back to a place where we can still smell the champagne in the carpet. So, it was kind of a double blow. And when Golden State came out and just laid one on the Cavs, it made everybody around here kind of look at things in a different light. And obviously the coaching change was made. And, I think Ty Lue has done a pretty nice job throughout the playoffs. He's made some savvy moves. He's kept his team focused, despite some pretty long breaks between series after they swept both Detroit and Atlanta. So, I think, while it did change everything, I think these two teams have been on a collision path since the end of last year.
Well, and I don't think anybody's doubting that. And certainly San Antonio, Oklahoma City, the LA Clippers, Portland, some other teams on the other side had the same thoughts. And Oklahoma City came very, very close to, slaying that beast, right? I mean, it was as close as you're going to come. For Cleveland, and you're writing about this out of the AP. Tom Withers joining us here from the Associated Press in Cleveland. And you can follow his journey out on Twitter at TWithersAP as well. You write about the city, and ESPN had its film, and I've been coming to Cleveland. My God, the first time I went to Cleveland, quite frankly, was one of the worst days in Cleveland history. It was the day of the drive. I was at the Elway game back in '86 and watched that. And I've witnessed some other things like the Tony Fernandez home run to beat the Orioles in '97. Right. Cleveland's had its chances to come close, but somehow this feels like it might sting more than any of the rest of that, because there really was a belief 2 weeks ago that maybe you were closer than you thought you were.
Yeah, maybe so. And for all the tough times that they associate with Cleveland, and this is the only city in the country, by the way, where the sports misery has nicknames. There also have been some pretty good times, and sometimes second place doesn't hurt as much as a lot of people think. And I think it's pretty remarkable that LeBron now has taken this franchise to 3 finals in the last 9 years after not getting to a final since 1970. The Indians have had, their ups and downs, but they've been a pretty competitive team by and large. I think that Believe Land documentary did leave out the 2007 Indians, who had a 3-1 lead over Boston in the ALCS and blew that one. So, it's well chronicled, and it's painful to the masses here to a degree, but there's still a hope here that this is going to come to an end, and that's why everybody was so excited when LeBron came back. It was his chance to come back and win the championship that would, separate him from Michael Jordan and from all the other greats, to be able to come back and end this long drought in his hometown or in his home area. So, I think a lot of people focus on, Cleveland and say, wow, they can never get over the top. But, there have also been some really great sports years here as well.
Well, and the Browns, maybe the hardest part is just how bad they are, that there is no hope there. I mean, we had that with the Orioles here for 15 years. We had that when we didn't have a football team. That it really becomes a one-trick pony. I would say this. I saw the Indians play last week. That shortstop special, and I don't think that the Royals, and we're seeing them play here in Baltimore this week, I have a feeling the Indians are going to be involved in the postseason in October. I think they're a pretty good baseball team. Yeah,
I totally agree with you. I mean, they've got a pitching staff, and their ace, Corey Kluber, has been the one guy who has not been delivering so far this year. But, they've got a nice roster, and if they get Michael Brantley back off the DL, he's been dealing with that shoulder ever since having surgery. That's a nice squad. And Terry Francona, who I still regard as, if not the best, one of the best managers in baseball, is going to keep them in the thick of it. I mean, he's managed to keep them in the hunt until the last 2 weeks of the season, the last couple of years. In fact, they made the wild card a couple of years ago. So, they're going to hang around, and I agree with you. I think the Royals, too, I mean, you're going to have to watch them because they're liable to flip the switch once we get to August and into September. But I think this Cleveland team is good enough to hang around until the end.
Have the Indians really sort of battled the shadow of the Cavaliers at this point? I remember when the Orioles were there, they were playing a big game against Toronto, and there was nobody in the ballpark, and people were saying, they're good. There's nobody in the ballpark in Baltimore either, right? So there's no excuse there. But right. I would say the Indians, when this thing's over with, and assuming the Cavaliers don't win, will people turn their lonely eyes toward the Indians at this point? And can they catch a little bit of that magic from the fan base that I'm familiar with back in the 90s? I mean, they were a well-supported team when the Jake was first built. It does feel a little sleepy around there, though.
Yeah, it is to a degree. I think, this team, you've mentioned Francisco Lindor before, who is absolutely the real deal. And if people haven't seen him play yet, well, then you're doing yourself a disservice and you should watch him, because he is already in his second year amongst the best shortstops in baseball, without a doubt. So I think this team has probably lacked a little bit of star power and those big names like they had in the 90s when, Manny Ramirez, arguably the best right-handed hitter I've ever seen, was hitting 7th in that Indians lineup. So, they haven't had those kinds of players that are just going to bring people into the ballpark. But, the Indians have done a nice job of kind of reconfiguring Progressive Field a little bit and making it, an attractive place to, millennials as well as old fans alike. So I do agree with you. I think the Indians will take a little bit of this boost that the Cavs and LeBron have given to Cleveland right now, and I think you'll see their attendance go up a little bit. And let's be honest, winning is what it's all about. And as long as the Indians are still, near the top of the standings, people will start to come out to support this team.
Tom Withers covered all things sports in the land of Cleve for the Associated Press. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at TWithersAP. And last and probably least, I'm doing OTAs. I've been out in Owings Mills all week. Man, I got so many friends out there in Cleveland I talk football with, and I've definitely talked some Cavs the last couple weeks. Anything you want to say about the Browns at all in this latest incarnation? I mean, I've been friends with Mike Pettin a long time. I was out there last summer as part of my 30-30 tour. I thought Pettin could have turned the corner, and certainly midway through the season and back in 14, it looked like they were on their way, and now it looks like, well, it's Robert Griffin III, and we'll figure it out, right?
Yeah, they're kind of starting over again. And, I'm with you. I thought Mike Pettin could do a nice job here, and I think he was, in some ways, doing a good job here. Unfortunately, the Johnny Manziel situation kind of, cast a shadow, however you want to call it, over this franchise for a couple of years. And that certainly didn't help matters. And obviously the Josh Gordon situation hurts as well. When you lose a Pro Bowl player of that caliber, to a suspension, that's going to hurt any offense. So, I like what I've seen out of first-year coach Hugh Jackson to this point. I mean, only time's going to tell whether he's the answer or not. And I'm still not sure RG3 is going to be, the short-term or long-term answer here. He's looked okay so far in OTAs, good and bad moments, but it's really hard to assess guys until you get to Sundays during the season and they go up against a Ravens defense or a Steelers defense or a good Bengals team as well. So I do think things are turning in the right direction. I think they finally do have the right people in place. They've cleaned out the front office once again. So, it's a matter of now owners Jimmy and Dee Haslam being patient, letting things root and finally grow a little bit. And I think better days are ahead for the Browns.
Well, that job was so toxic, right? I mean, just to land Hugh Jackson, land a real respected coach was quite the coup for the organization, I think, given all the mess they've had there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could, make a strong argument that he was the best guy available when the Browns were looking for a coach. So, yeah, I think they did a nice job in the draft this past year. They addressed some major needs. They've got to make savvy moves now in the future, whether it's signing free agents or taking some of the guys they currently have on the roster and giving them long-term contracts. But, as I said, I think they finally turned the corner to some degree. And again, it's up to the Haslams now to show a little bit of restraint and let some things blossom.
Always great to have you on, man. Enjoy what's left of the basketball out there. Really enjoyed your piece out on the AP, and we platform a lot of your work at WNST. Thanks for coming on, Tom.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you.
Tom Withers, the Associated Press. He is T. Withers AP out in the land of Cleve and out on Twitter. He's got a wonderful Twitter picture of him doing the bobsled in Sochi. So and also a picture of what a parade might look like in Cleveland. Who knows? You can find me out in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. I'm going to be out at Black Eyed Susan on Saturday from 11:30 to 2, signing books in Glendon. That's copies of Purple Rain 1 and Purple Rain 2 in advance of Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to everybody out there. Happy June to everybody. I'll be watching some Oriole baseball this weekend, some NBA, some NHL, and we've talked a ton about Muhammad Ali this week. It's been a great week of radio here and some great storytelling, which I take great pride in. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.